Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Kirsty and I am an Events and Project Assistant here at UMI. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and please feel free to ask questions, and you can do so using the Q&A box. There will be time for questions at the end, but I will check in with you throughout the session. Today I'm joined by my colleague Jamie, who is EM3 Senior Project Manager. Good morning Jamie, how are you doing?
Good morning, very well thank you, and you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. Okay, I thought it'd be just useful to give a little bit of background information on the Growth Hub, just in case you're new. We're a fully funded business support service providing advice, coaching, webinars and signposting to small to medium enterprises. Our mission is to help you recover, adapt, develop sustainable growth after COVID and to become more productive and profitable. All businesses at any stage of their development can access and benefit from the Enterprise M3 Growth Hub services, including the information bank, the resource network, and the helpline. And additionally, there's a specialist growth service targeted at businesses operating within key sectors, which is a free personal service for business associated with the Enterprise M3 key sectors, which aims to connect businesses with experts to help their growth plans. So today we are joined by one of our associate growth champions at the Growth Hub. So Neville, if you could introduce yourself and the subject of today's webinar, please.
Well, good morning, everybody. And yes, I'm Neville Merritt. I'm one of the associate growth champions. In my former career, I've spent a lot of time in sales, marketing, and senior positions. So I know firsthand what a challenge it is to actually grow your business and get more leads. So today I'm going to spend some time going through LinkedIn and what you can actually do with LinkedIn to grow your business through generating interest and inquiries. So if it's all right with you guys, I'll share my screen and we'll pile straight in. There we go. And we all see that. Are we good?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Right, let's just press on then, and I will ask a few questions first of all. What do you really want from LinkedIn? And so this is a question really to the audience. So if you want to pop in the chat, and I'll come back a little bit later and see what people want. Is it actually to get new sales leads, or do you want to find support for your existing sales pipeline, or find business partners, or get a new job? And so if you could just let us know what your main interests are, then we can build that into the rest of the presentation. But first of all, I want to ask a question. What is LinkedIn really the right platform for you to generate business from? And one of the key questions there is it the right place? And one of the things I use quite often is an analogy with fishing. Now I go fishing, and so it's a natural analogy to me, but I think one of the things that they do say is you don't catch a trout in a ploughed field. So if your market is, you have to fish where the fish are. And LinkedIn has got a particular market. It's great if you are selling to B2B and above average income B2C. If that's not your target market, then perhaps LinkedIn isn't the best for you. But as you'll see with some statistics in a minute, that does cover a vast proportion of the business marketplace. So if you're into business to business, then it probably is the right place. I'm going to run through a few stats just to introduce LinkedIn. And it was launched in 2003 and acquired by Microsoft in 2016. And it's now about 675 million people plus. And now the key thing for anybody in the UK is, how many of those are actually in the UK? Well, there's 28 million registered members in the UK. And when you think there's only 30 million UK taxpayers, most of whom are relatively low income proportionately, then that's a very big proportion of the business marketplace. And also just the interesting stats here, 91% have an education beyond secondary school, and 39% actually pay a subscription of some form. And it's a fairly equal balance, slightly more men than women, but it's comforting that we have a very good proportion of women to men in here. So if we go on to what people do, why do they go on to LinkedIn? The people that are active, it amounts to 38% of that. So 260 million people are active on LinkedIn at least monthly. By active, it means going on and looking at it. It doesn't mean actually interacting. So clearly, some are looking for jobs, some are actively selling, and mostly people are looking for something that's useful to them. And those could be business connections, industry news, as it says here, new ideas, shared experiences, solutions to problems, etc., etc. So did we get any in the chat? Kirsty, are you able to see that and tell us what people were particularly interested in?
Yes, we did. So we have Michael Castle, new leads.
Yeah, new leads.
Jenny Harden, sales leads. Teresa Ward, sales leads.
Yeah.
Karen Worcester, support existing clients and
Excellent.
contacts.
Okay, good.
Maria Findlay, looking to make the right networks. We connect businesses to academic expertise. To win quality leads. So leads, sales and partnerships, leads.
So generally it's leads. Well, that's not surprising given that we built that it was about generating leads. So we're definitely in the right place. So let's just show you one more statistic. Now there's actually 9 billion impressions of content per week on LinkedIn. But the weird thing is that only comes from 3 million users. And if you just take the active users, which is 38% of the registered users, it's only 1.15% of active users are posting. So it's really easy, if you do some work on LinkedIn, it's really easy to be more visible than 98.85% of LinkedIn. That's my schoolboy maths for you. So Jamie, did you surprised at that number?
Yeah, to be honest, I thought, I knew LinkedIn was pretty big really, but I had absolutely no idea that we were looking at that volume, but also the opportunities there as well. I mean, how long have you been on LinkedIn?
I was in LinkedIn fairly early on, actually, sort of the early to mid noughties, and my membership number is 10 million and something. So 665 million people joined after me. So I was relatively early on. And by the way, if you want to do something a little bit techie, if you go onto LinkedIn and do Control F, you open up all the code. If you do a search, and F is find, by the way, if you do a search for the word member, when it comes up, it shows you a number next to the member. That's your membership number. So if you've used one of the tools, which I'll show you later, to change your URL, then your number will disappear, but that number is always in there. It's part of the cookie, so the LinkedIn knows who is logged in.
That's interesting.
So that's a common perception, to be honest. So why aren't more people making easy money from LinkedIn? Back to phishing. Don't fall into the hope trap. And it's terribly easy to go onto LinkedIn, you create your profile, and sit back and wait for the phone to ring. And it's a bit like fishing. If you chuck a line in the water and hope for fish to go by, it probably won't. So a bit of fishing tackle strap line here. This is from one of the major manufacturers. It says, they say, to catch a fish, you've got to think like a fish, no matter how weird it gets. And I think that's quite good, because if we want to attract a customer, we have to think like a customer and put ourselves in our customer's shoes. And that's, again, the sales thing. To really know your customer, you've got to walk a mile in the customer's shoes. So the first thing I would recommend before we even go into LinkedIn in any kind of detail is we need to really know our customer. And I think anybody who's had anything to do with marketing has probably heard the term avatar or persona. And this is how people who are trying to attract attention to their products and services target their target market by creating a fictitious representation of their customer. And I have a template for this, and I can link to that later on. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I can share that. But the key thing here is profiling the customer in terms of not just the demographics, which is the easy bit. What kind of gender are they? What age group? What interests? What business? What sector? What role? Etc. But also profile what is it they really want? What's going to light their fire? And what's their desires? What their interests? And then conversely, what are the things that people are scared of? What are they afraid of? What are they worried about? Because that's just as powerful as a means of attraction. Giving people a route to avoid some of those problems is as attractive as giving them a route to achieve some of their gains. And also we can look at prior experience. So that's one of the key things, is understanding the customer. And the other thing we need to recognize is knowing how our customers go about buying things. And we should know this because we're all customers and we all go out and buy things ourselves. And we all follow this kind of a cycle. Particularly, it's fairly obvious when you're looking at a fairly major investment like a new car or a house or B2B purchase. But actually, we go through a very similar thing for almost every purchase we make, although the time scale is quite compressed. So first of all, we don't even know we want something or need something. And then we think, actually, I've got a bit of a problem, not quite sure how to fix it. So you start looking around, and then you discover that there are some solutions to that problem. So you then look at suppliers of that solution and look at compare with your friends and what did they do, and look at reviews and so on. And you might do some web searches, and you're probably halfway through that selection process before you even contact a supplier. And then once you go into that formal process, you might narrow it down to a few or couple to look at, perhaps, or even just one, and get some details and form a relationship, sign an order, and hopefully be so happy that you recommend it to others. And this is the classic sales cycle of know, like, and trust. And we know about this in sales, know, like, and trust, but sometimes we forget about it when we actually start doing the marketing. So if you look at LinkedIn, most people on LinkedIn, and most people not on LinkedIn, to be honest, that's your entire target market, over 90% will not even be interested in looking, even though they are demographically the right market. They may not be aware that they even have a problem, or if they're aware of the problem, may not be aware of you. But if we progress that slightly further, there might be people who are aware of a need, they are aware that there are solutions out there in the market, then they are looking, but they haven't contacted a supplier yet. So really that's our LinkedIn sweet spot. So we really need two strategies. One of them is for that first group, not looking. And these are people who would probably react very negatively if we started pushing ourselves on them by being intrusive selling. So we need to just create awareness and create value and build that relationship, and also build our authority. In other words, give them evidence that we know what we're talking about. And we can start building our connections, building our network. But if you start selling at that point, it's actually going to be counterproductive. And the other group, the group B, now group B are looking. So you need to make sure that you are findable and to be found. So you need to have the right hooks in there for search terms and so on, both through your profile and the other activities which we'll talk about later. And even more importantly is having evidence of the authority and making it really easy to engage with you and contact you. And it's not just through LinkedIn. I'm surprised how many profiles I look at where there's no phone number, there's no email. It's very difficult to contact somebody unless you go through internal messaging. And then you know that those people are probably looking, but again, if you try and accelerate the pace at that stage, people aren't ready for that. And what I would recommend is drive it as you would in any sales situation, but just be wary of the customer's pace and don't try and oversell at that stage. Jamie, have you been on LinkedIn and found that people have jumped in and tried to sell to you too soon?
Absolutely, yeah, and much of my experience, I guess you've just outlined in there, because if I don't know them, then naturally I won't necessarily trust, and ultimately not like if it is continued to be pushed. And I think it's often gets mixed up amongst everything else. So you could have people who have been really pushy, and then when you get another more valuable approach, you tend to ignore it, I find.
So you're basically saying salespeople give the whole profession a bad name by being too pushy?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think the second message you get from a new contact being a sales pitch is probably not the best one, to be honest. And this is why I'm saying drive it at the customer's pace. If you don't think somebody's actively looking, then don't even start pushing. But if you think somebody is looking, then be helpful rather than being pushy. We've got any questions yet there, Kirsty?
Yes, thanks, Neville. So what about the people who are already further down the customer journey, such as talking to a short list of suppliers?
Oh, right. Okay, let's just flick back. Yes, the people who are further down. Well, those people are already engaged, and yes, there's an opportunity there, but it's an uphill struggle because there are other organizations who have already got in there ahead of you. You're not in column A anymore in sales speak. So I'd say, yes, there's an opportunity, but I would say that's not part of a LinkedIn strategy. So I would concentrate on building that future pipeline through Group A and Group B, and to not get sidetracked on LinkedIn with the people already looking. But if they do engage with you, then that's great. You can go on and sell.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Neville.
All right. Other questions at the moment? We'll come back to the others later, shall we? So how do we engage with customers on LinkedIn? This is really what we came here for. So there are about 7 things, I think it is, 7 things that we can do on LinkedIn, and I'm going to run through them one by one. So that's our kind of our headline. And one of those, the first one, is going to be building the personal profile, which I'm sure everybody has, but there's a few tips there I just want to share with you for making a great profile. One of the things to be aware of, I get back to fishing, is some fishing tackle is designed to catch fishermen and not fish, because tackle shops make a lot of money selling to fishermen. So we have to be very mindful that the content we put on our profiles and that we share through comments and so on is not just something that we're interested in, but something actually that our customers are interested in. So we want to attract a customer rather than just brag about what we want to talk about. That's a key thing. And I do see people falling into that trap. Now, building a best personal profile is where we're going to start. And what I'm going to show you is a few pages from my ebook. And again, if anybody wants a copy of this ebook, let me know at the end. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share it, because we are limited with time today. So I'm going to go through the key points, but there's obviously plenty more that we can talk about. So this is the profile that you're all familiar with, and I'll just run through some ones that I think are particularly important. And the first one there, the most important by far, is having a good headshot. And I think that needs to be very much sort of full face rather than just something in the distance, and definitely not your cats. You can, and dogs and things, you can keep that for Facebook. But the other thing is, I would I've got a particular technique in the ebook on how to take an attractive headshot, which is not looking like a most wanted photo. Second one is the banner image, which is the image at the back. I can't show you that one here particularly well because what I'm showing there is my editing screen, but I'll show you another one on a company page. The other one is the title. You can say what you do, which doesn't have to be your job. So you can say, you know, I help customers do X, Y, and Z. Contact information I've mentioned before, make it really easy. And the websites, my tip is to choose you've got 3 different websites you can put on there: your home website, your company website, and another one. If you choose other, you can actually change the title of the website prompt. So it could be your corporate website, it could be your divisional website, and so on. The other bit that we can do is customize our URL. So that makes it more personal. So I'm lucky, there are no other Neville Merritts, apart from one other in the world I found in Australia, but there's very few with my name, so that's quite fortunate. If you've got a more common name, then you may have to adapt it slightly. But if you have a URL that's got your name in it, that's better than just a number. And then the other one, the key one, the next one down, is the summary. And this is not, unless you're looking for a job, this is not your CV. This is something that you need to write that attracts your customer. So your customer, if you're in sales, your customer does not want to know that you are, you know, a top performing salesman that closes loads of deals and is a hard-hitting go-getter. That's what you do if you were applying for a new job. If you want to attract a customer, they don't want to see that. They want to see how you can help them rather than how they can help you get your commission. So think of it as, you know, how you can sell yourself to the customer in the customer's context. Next one is moving down into the next most important, I think, is in the experience. So this is the experience of, you know, basically your job listing. And it starts with your most recent post or your current post. And you can write that in the present tense. And by the way, link to the company page. If you link to the company page, it pulls in the logo. If you don't link to the company page, it pulls in a blank logo, which doesn't look good. And then if you move jobs, make sure you change the content to be in the past tense. Otherwise, it looks a bit weird. And then you can highlight achievements. And we can also link to rich media. So I'll talk about that next, actually. So rich media is where you can put more than just words in your profile, and doesn't just apply to the jobs and history, it applies elsewhere. So rich media is videos, presentations, documents, etc. And you can showcase some of those. So there's a new feature called a showcase where you can highlight videos and other content and show that at the top. Now, I think those are probably the most important parts of the profile. And I know I'll whiz through them quite quickly, and there's a lot more that you can put on profiles, but I think when people look at profiles, these are the things they look at first of all. There are other pages I've got for what those other parts of the profile actually cover, and other things to do with LinkedIn. So that's in my ebook. Jamie, when you said you were sometimes irritated by people contacting you too soon, and obviously you've got lots of connections. What do you look at when you go on to check out somebody's profile? What catches your eye?
I think generally it's just to sort of check for almost like authenticity, and what that background of that person is. You can just go through, look at their connections, try to understand some of the work history as well, and obviously what the volume of content is there and whether that's valuable or relevant. I think that's always played quite a big part in when I would review it. But again, much of what you just said there, I realised that I'm not even doing myself in my profile, so perhaps I'm encouraging the wrong interest.
That's a good point, actually. Yes, if you have, in fact, if you have information which is, perhaps not selling yourself in the way you want to, then you might be creating a misleading impression. But I think actually worse is where there's a gap. And people have a habit of filling the gap with something that's in their own head. So they'll make up something or make an assumption, which may be a long way from the truth. So having content that's missing is actually more important than to fix than perfectly refining what is actually there. But you're absolutely right. Having an evidence of authenticity is going to make the difference between people wanting to connect with you and not. And both proactively, people wanting to connect with you or people that you have invited are going to check you out and then decide whether or not to accept. And that's a very common thing. Have you got any more questions yet?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in the chat box there, Neville.
Good.
So,
can you read them out?
Yeah. Can you explain how to change the name of the URL, please?
Yes, you can edit the URL actually in the editing feature. So if you go to your editing page, it's called Customize URL, and you can just overwrite it. So you click on it, overwrite it. And if your name is David Smith and there's about 5,000 David Smiths, then it's not going to let you use that. But if you have, David-Smith or David.n.Smith or something, then as long as it's unique, you can choose what you like. But again, keep it professional. It's not Facebook, so you don't want to have Barry Big Hammer or something like that. It needs to be a professional name.
Thank you. And the other one was read an article yesterday from a marketer about headshots, and they were saying that because everyone's becoming so used to Zooming over the last 6 months, that people are now warming to having less of a corporate profile. So something like you do in a hobby or something a little bit more relaxed. What's your thoughts on that, Neville?
It's a very tiny picture. So I think the most important thing is make sure that your head fills the screen, because when it's very, very small, and it's particularly when it's done as an icon, you want people to build a relationship with you, the person. And if you're sort of sitting in your aeroplane or in your sports car or whatever, and you're some tiny dot in the distance, yes, that's authentic if you like, but I think that doesn't convey the real you. So again, this is entirely personal. I think it's absolutely right to have authenticity and having a genuine photo and not too staged. But on the other hand, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and forget that this is actually trying to build relationships. So we do need to see people's faces. Yeah. The other thing is that some of these interests might be perceived as kind of being a bit elitist or bragging or weird or whatever. So I think that can be a little bit dangerous. So be a bit careful with what you choose. And I have seen ones where people have been sitting in a sports car with a helmet on and goggles on, and people just think, oh yeah, you got a sports car. That doesn't really give you the kind of warmth and relationship start point that I think people will be looking for. But it's a good question, and I think business is becoming a lot more relaxed than it was, particularly in the last few months. But you can go too far, in my opinion. But then I'm old school.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay, let's move on. So the next one is publishing. Create company and showcase pages. So this is the company page and the showcase pages. These are the equivalent of a profile for a company. And I said I'd show you a banner image, and this is quite a good one, I think. It's from a company called Business Film Booth, and they use the banner image, the custom banner image, which you can upload. Basically, that is an advert for their business, and it says exactly what they do, and it's attractive and it's interesting. And the next bit below that is a bit more about the profile of the company. So If you are working for a company and they haven't perhaps developed their company page as well as it could have been, then I would encourage you to go to the marketing department and get them to do that. If you run your own business, then most definitely you need to have a company identity as well. Now, you can post as a company as well, but again, that picks up the logo rather than the your personality. So again, it's there as a parallel. My view is that have it and use it as a sort of local website if you like, but do most of your interacting as you yourself. So that's their company pages. Next part is publishing articles. And articles are, they keep changing their names, but at the moment it's articles. And this is where you can reproduce your blog, and this is native to LinkedIn. And the great thing about being native to LinkedIn is that LinkedIn will actively promote it in the feed. So this is an example of an article I wrote on my website, but I've reproduced it on LinkedIn. And the great thing is that Google does not penalize you for duplicating content if it's on social media. So this one is how Frederick the Great marketed the potato, and he was way ahead of his time, actually. He used some of Cialdini's principles to market potatoes. So I thought that was interesting. So that gets a certain amount of interest. I would say the type of interest you get there is high quality, but perhaps lower volume than some of the other things that you can do on LinkedIn. But you can use it to evidence your authority, and it also is something which is adding value. So don't use it as a sales pitch, use it as a way of helping your customers come to the right decision. And it evidences the things that you can do, and you can build that in as you go through, but just don't make it too obvious. It's an article, people read it because they want to find out something, not to be sold to again. You can promote it with a post as well. So having written the article, you then are given the option to promote the article with a post, and then that invites comments, and the comments go mostly on your post and also on the article itself for perpetuity. So that's that. Next thing we can do is create new posts. Now, this is something which I'm sure people are very familiar with because they go on LinkedIn, and on their homepage there are loads of posts. And this is where I want to show you some examples of how other people are doing it. But I think that's better than me just saying, do this, do that. And I want to introduce you to a guy called Daniel Disney. And Daniel Disney is a salesperson, and he started on the checkouts in Homebase. Then he moved into sales and has had a great career in sales, but still a pretty young guy. But he always wanted to go into sales through training and social selling. So he established a presence on LinkedIn, and he created something called the Daily Sale. And he built a following by sharing memes, which were sales jokes. And salesmen, they can't resist having a bit of fun. This is not Daniel Disney there, that's obviously Leonardo DiCaprio. But the sort of meme he's talking about is salesman as you didn't hit your KPIs and me still hitting my sales target. That's the sort of thing that would make any salesman smile. And so he did that for about a year, and he built up a huge following. And that meant that if you take the followers and then the shares that they do and the number of people that actually see that are not necessarily your followers, then he's calculated he's reached 500,000. And so he posts actually daily, and he gets 200 to 300 likes on each post, and videos, he gets 3,000 or 4,000 views for his little mini videos. And so he uses LinkedIn to funnel all of his business activity. He's now gone independent. He now does public speaking and runs courses, and doesn't spend a penny on marketing. It's all through LinkedIn, and that's how he does it. Another one is a lady called Jerry Williams. She runs an accounting practice, started at about the same time as Daniel. I started running an accounting practice in her garage, and she started off running sort of educational videos like this, and that was fine. That's how it started, but she's quite a character, and very quickly she started sharing her thoughts in an unfiltered way on LinkedIn, and so it became, people were accusing her of being like Facebook or TikTok or whatever, but it's become very powerful as a way of getting followers. And she's built active followers now is about 20,000, not as many as Daniel, but her text posts and videos get an enormous number of views and likes. And the vast majority of those are just following her because she's a fun person. But there's a proportion in there where they are approaching her to do their business because they want somebody who's not a dry, fusty old accountant. They want somebody who's a fun girl. And she's gone from 0 to 11 employees in 4 years, and she can't keep up with new business requests. So I think that's you've got to use that method with caution. But she has definitely grown her business on LinkedIn by being very active. Now, if you remember this one, we're 9 billion from 3 million users. So there's 98+% of all LinkedIn users aren't doing anything. They are just reading. And this is the final one I'm going to share with you from Mandy Allen, who's a colleague of mine in another business that runs a CRM consultancy. And this is only last week, just very briefly, she posted this, that a few weeks ago, completely out of the blue, she had a contact from somebody she had no connection with in terms of interaction with. They had a call, they wanted a meeting, they had the meeting, and they walked away with business. So she had no idea that person had progressed so far on that sales cycle or that buyer's cycle. So they were obviously a long way through deciding they wanted to deal with them, purely on the back of reading the things that Mandy had been posting. So you don't have to have the fun side or the personality necessarily of a Jerry or a Daniel, but if you are authentic and you're adding value like Mandy, then you can definitely attract business. So my top tips for posting there are definitely be personal and don't just regurgitate your corporate PR stuff. Have pictures, particularly human beings, and be original, particularly with an engaging story, relevant obviously, and posting regularly. I think most importantly, all of those, well, I just mentioned, they post every day, but they only post once a day, because if you post more than once a day, the LinkedIn algorithm will suppress your first post with your second post. So just do it once a day. The other thing is, you'll see from those numbers, video's got a far higher engagement than static images. And the other final thing, just to keep in line with LinkedIn's algorithm, is put any links in your post in the comment, not actually in the post, because LinkedIn doesn't want to promote people who are taking their audience away from LinkedIn. Same as Facebook. So that's a little bit on posting. Jamie, you've been posting a bit, haven't you? What sort of things do you share, or what attracts you in other people's posts?
So typically, I'll share like information. So I'll be signposting people something relevant that perhaps as an organisation that we would be hosting, like a webinar, for instance. And I don't do too much more than that. And one of the things I am quite conscious, I know you touched on it as well, is that fine line between going too personal and almost treating it like other social media channels. And, you know, you're almost representing your own opinion, but you are also representing an organization. And, you know, really a question, I guess, to you, Neville, is where would you draw the line in that sense? Yes,
well, I'm going to cover that on the next part on commenting, actually, because, and I think you're absolutely right, when it comes to posting, that is really your first comment. And it's risky if you treat it like social media, personal social media. Jerry uses it to her advantage, and she gets a lot of coverage because of that, not necessarily the right sort of attention. She certainly has a few fights on LinkedIn. Daniel never does that. It's always to do with sales. He's very focused. My personal view is, be a person, and you can share your pain and suffering and your successes and celebrations, but in a business context, rather than, you know, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Isn't it a fun day, or something like that? That's fine if you have a 20,000 following who also want to share your breakfast, but that isn't necessarily going to be most people's daily agenda.
What I'm picking up a little bit there, I guess, is that it's a professional platform, and it's not necessarily, you know, like Twitter, for instance, where you could probably voice personal opinion more and get into a battle and so on. It's not necessarily that, because you've got some degree of a professional persona to maintain.
Oh yeah, I think a big degree of professional. But as we talked about earlier, actually, we're becoming more relaxed in our business life. I mean, I used to go to work in a suit and tie, and we never took our ties off. And it wasn't until probably about 8 years ago now, I actually took my tie off in the office. And now, you know, I'd feel choked up if I wore a tie, and, you know, none of us are wearing ties and jackets. And there was, you know, there's still a small part of business where that's kind of the norm. But most people, and particularly working from home, we've got very much used to a more casual approach. and I think we've just got to be careful we don't take that too casual. And I think we're working from home, and that is I think suddenly we've given ourselves the opportunity of being very casual, and we just got to be a little bit careful. But again, like I said, I'm in my 60s now, so I'm a bit old school, and I have a young daughter who keeps telling me off for being stuffy sometimes. So I do have a internal balance there. Kirsty, you've got some questions you're jiggling about there?
So I think you kind of just covered it there. It's more like, do you think LinkedIn is becoming like Facebook with some of the posts?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we've got to be careful. It's we don't get too engaged. But the thing is, with that, some people will, and it's not our job to police LinkedIn. It's not our job to be a Facebook police on LinkedIn. And so if we don't like it, scroll on. And if other people want to engage, let them. I think, yes, it does create a lot more noise, and that's a bit irritating. But as I'm about to say, let's move on to the next bit, because the thing on commenting, I think is really important. And I can answer that question here as well. I think if we are commenting, we really need to be adding value to our customers. So do our customers want to see us having a go at somebody else for being like Facebook? Do we want to be like Facebook ourselves? Is that helping our customers? It depends on your customer, your market, and your own personality, actually. But I think most importantly is get out there and do it. Be active, do some commenting, and keep it particularly relevant and professional. I think we need also not to be afraid of a healthy debate, because if we just keep saying, oh yeah, that's wonderful, or keep silent if we don't agree, I think it's very valuable to have a debate. If somebody says something that you don't agree with, you don't need to get into a fight with them, but you can say, well, actually, I've got an alternative view here. Let's compare ideas, and it becomes a really interesting thread, and that will actually promote your reputation, both in terms of the algorithm, but also with people's perception, because they know you have an opinion and you can back it up, and that I think is a positive. I think you do need to know when to stop. In other words, if it's getting a bit silly or you're getting a bit emotive, then be the first one to walk away from a fight, not the one on the floor. So that's a bit of a word of caution, really. So that's commenting. Hopefully that answered the Facebook question as well.
Thank you.
The next one is groups, and I'm going to be honest here. I have a mixed view. In fact, I don't really have one view, I think, in the end, on how valuable groups are. Jamie, help me out here. What do you think of groups?
I'm a member of a few groups, but to be perfectly honest, I've not really had that much engagement with it, because typically, if I've got an interest in a subject, I'd find forums or groups that exist outside of LinkedIn that are a bit more rich. And because of that, I've not really done much with it at all, to be honest. Yeah,
I'm the same. I think there are some groups which are of value to me personally, and this is my own group list, and I think it orders it in the ones that you've most recently joined. So I joined Camtasia Video Editors. So I run online training for sales and marketing. So I use Camtasia to edit my videos, and it's quite a learning curve for old school like me. But we have a lot of fun on that, and I learn lots of things. When I was in sales in corporates, we were selling to the public sector, there were some really interesting groups organised by the public sector, buying groups actually, which are wonderful to be a member of, because I'd go in there and find out what people wanted to buy. However, they were very, very vigorous in keeping salespeople out of their groups, which I can understand, but actually I think I could have helped them. But I think some of our salespeople have gone there before me and done a bit too much of the heavy selling. And I think if you go into, for example, the Institute of Directors group, which I'm a member of, you go in there and it's just consultants selling to each other all the time. So it ends up, that group not being of any value, and it's kind of it's self-destructed, which is a shame. So there are some. I think it's one of those ones where you just have to try it out and see which is the one that works for you, and interact in that group. And that's probably, I'll share your view there, Jamie. That's my opinion anyway. I'm sure there'll be some niche groups that people will find very successful. Then the final part is connecting, and of course that's one of the things we really could have started with, because LinkedIn is all to do with building business connections. And I think the key here is the wider your network, the luckier you'll be. And let's get a sales quote there, really, because the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think if you have a wide network, then that network will see what you're up to, and you have bigger opportunity for linking. And the great thing is that with the whole sharing thing, is that if you have a network of people like you or in your target market who find your content interesting, then they'll share it with their network, and you'll reach people that you don't have in your network, which is brilliant. And obviously, the more value you share, the more you'll be connected, because people will see your comments, they'll see the content that's been shared, and they'll reach out and want to connect back with you. And the key thing, though, is when you have a new connection, and we touched on this earlier, Jamie, didn't we? If we connect with people for the first time, then the key measure is despite the temptation, don't start selling at that first moment, because it's just like if you had a breakfast briefing, networking meeting in a hotel room. You introduce yourself, you get to talk to people. If you start shoving brochures in their hands at that point, I think they would get a very negative reaction. It's the same with LinkedIn. And one of the, again, mantras I have in sales is you diagnose before you prescribe. So understand what people's challenges are or their desires are before we say how we can help them. So there's no point telling people what you do if you don't know that they actually want the things that you are selling. And also, very often, people don't know that the thing you're selling is the thing that can fix their problem. So if you understand what their problem is and describe how you can fix it, that's much better than selling people a solution where they may not make the connection between what you've got and what they need. This goes right back to the part that I started with and I'll finish with. Now, there's a little tool which I think some salespeople might know of, but not everybody knows of. It's called your Social Selling Index. And this is the URL for it. It's not obvious from any menu item as far as I can find on LinkedIn, but if you know the URL, you can find it. And this is an index which builds your a score, basically, based on who you're connecting with, how many you've connected with, the level of seniority and the connections that your network has, and the amount of content that you publish and the engagement that your content has with your audience. So it's quite a complex algorithm. And it does keep changing from time to time. So you'll see your score go up and down even though you haven't done anything different. But the great thing here is I haven't, on this particular one, which was last week, 68 out of 100, which dropped back a bit, it still gave me, put me in the top 4% of my industry. Now, my industry is pretty active, so I'm quite happy with being in that top 4%. So my network is even more active, and I know I'm up against some people who are doing an awful lot of work. So I'm still up in the top 15%. And that's not doing a huge amount on LinkedIn. I do some, obviously, but there are other people that do more, but I still have a very good score. And yesterday I thought, well, I'll just see how it's changed. And I got another score at 71. That's after doing just a few more posts and connecting with a few more people in the last week. So I'm now in the top 3% of the industry rank. So that means that if I go out there and post, I'm going to be more visible than 97% of the other people in my industry, which I think is a good place to be if you want to influence people in your network.
Neville, can I just interrupt there? Do you have to have LinkedIn Premium for that?
No.
No.
Anybody can get it. Yeah, it's tied into LinkedIn Premium, but if you know the URL, I do pay a subscription, but I've been grandfathered in with a very old one. So as far as I know, that is just a URL. If you know the URL, you can find it, and certainly other people have found it. LinkedIn have got a bit of a habit of changing things. So what I say today might not be exactly the way they do it tomorrow. And that's why actually on my ebook, some of the screenshots are from a previous version of LinkedIn, but the principle's the same anyway. Okay, so I just want to summarize before we take some more questions. So the key takeaways here, and I'll go right back to that first one, know your customer. Because if you don't have a formal diagnostic of your customer, it's actually quite difficult to be sure you're posting the right things for your customer. So you really need to know who your customers are and what they need. And you may well need more than one type of profile, because you may want to have, you got to have people representing different aspects of your market. So for the Growth Hub, for example, one of the demographics there would be people who are managing small growth industries in the M3 sector, but another demographic would be people in local authorities who you could partner with to do collaborative ventures. So reaching out to those could be a different profile. And the same with if you sell through a channel, you sell to the end user, but you also sell to partners, business partners. And the second point was know how your customers buy, and be very aware that the LinkedIn sweet spot is the early stage. So people are checking you out before you even know they exist. They're looking at your profile, they're reading your content. In fact, over 98% of them won't be interacting with you online. They may well contact you like they did with Mandy, and that's the sweet spot to focus on. So these are my top takeaway tips. Create a profile that represents the real you. So in other words, be genuine and provide evidence of your talents. And most of all, don't be shy, and have a photo and post out there and help people and be active. So do some commenting to start with, create your own posts. Video is fantastic. So again, I've got a whole ton of stuff I can cover on video, but we don't have time today. Be consistent and present, I think preferably a daily post. And if you respond to people who are responding to you, then I think ultimately you're going to be really successful. So that's what I wanted to cover today. We're up to 45 minutes and we've got some time left for questions. So I'm going to put up a questions thing, but also that's got my contact details on. And you'll see there a QR code. And if you have the LinkedIn app, all you have to do is point the app at, in fact, I think just have to point the camera at that code, and you'll see me jumping up as part of your LinkedIn community initiative. You can connect from there. If you're already connected, you can say hello or something. And those are my other Growth Hub contact details. So, Kirsty, have we got any more questions coming in?
Yes, so first one being, where can we find a copy of the free LinkedIn ebook?
Right, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message and I will send it to you. It's a PDF, about 16 pages.
Thank you. There's a couple of people asking that.
Yeah.
And then I've got another one here. I have diversified during COVID, and my profile is photography based, but now I'm looking to promote personalised mug designs and printing. What would you suggest is the best way to advance that side, causing minimum crossover and confusion?
Ooh, that's interesting. This is a great opportunity for your company page. So you can have more than one showcase page on that. I think because you are an individual, you can say that you have both of those. I think if you're using one personal profile to try and promote both, that could be a challenge. And I've got the same challenge myself, actually, because as you can see, I can't see on there, but on previous slides, there was a copyright for a company called Pure Potential. That's actually our business, and it's been running 20 years. And my spin-off business is Ascent Learning. So we actually do have two brands that we promote. One is online learning, the other one is executive coaching. So I go down the Ascent Learning side, although I do help out on the coaching through that. So I think within the profile, in the summary, I would have the website links to the various websites, because now you know that with the term other, you can link to more than one website. You can link to more than one showcase page, and you can explain what you do in the summary reasonably well. I think at one point you end up with one person. You can't have two profiles representing your two persona, your own personal persona, but you can branch out using that. So I wouldn't try and hide it. I would embrace it and say these are the things that I do and I'm engaged with. And plenty of people do have multiple businesses. They have a main business and a side hustle. That's nothing wrong with that. But there's the tools to do it on LinkedIn, so that's good.
Thank you. So I've got another one. How do you delete someone, and how is that done? And if it can be done, is it public?
Delete as in disconnect or block?
Yes, I think maybe it's just disconnect someone.
Okay, good question. Because yes, sometimes you don't want to connect with people, and sometimes you want to block followers and things like that. So yes, there are tools in LinkedIn for you to disconnect from a connection, and I do that on a regular basis because I tend to accept a lot of connections that look genuine rather than scammy ones. But genuine ones, if they try and sell to me in the first message, then they will get disconnected. I say that on my profile as well. I say, I'm going to disconnect you if you try and sell to me. And those that do, I disconnect. And it comes up to say, if you disconnect from somebody, then it comes up to say they won't be told you've disconnected. And if you have people you're not connected with, but are following you and are being irritating or annoying you on comments and so on, you can actually block them. And the way you do that is with one of the drop downs, and it's on the, if you want to disconnect with somebody, it's when you go onto their profile and you're connected, there's a drop down, I think from memory, it's just fairly high up top right. There's a little arrow drop down and it says, manage your connection or disconnect or something like that. That's how you do it. But yes, you can disconnect and block, which are two different things. But you can definitely do it and they don't know that's what you've done.
Cool, thank you. We also have, what is the difference between followers on your profile versus connections, and how would you go about increasing your followers?
Okay, good question, and that's great examples earlier on where those ones where I showed you lots of followers and lots of connections. Connections are ones where you have a two-way connection. In other words, you have an invitation to connect and you accept the invitation and you two are connected. So you're part of their network, they're part of your network. It's a two-way thing. A follower is where they or you are just following the other person. The other person, depending on which tools you've got, can see followers or just see numbers of followers, and it isn't a connection as such. But they will see, if you're following somebody, you will see all of their posts in your feed, which is why you have followers. You also see the posts of connections. So there's quite an overlap between the two. But I think the key difference is that you can follow people without being connected, but you can't connect without also being a follower, really, as far as I know, because those two are tied in. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good question.
And then we have one. I have found that LinkedIn hasn't got the business description that fits. What do we do in the business or personal profile? How do I overcome it? Sorry.
You can edit the business. You can't edit the business category, but to be honest, nobody really cares too much about business category, so that can be fairly general and it's a bit American. The actual description of the business or your job title you can overwrite. So if you want to describe your business differently from the category that you're in, I think that's what they mean, you can do that. But I wouldn't get too worried about the category because they are kind of general, and I think with all SIC codes, standard industrial classification codes, they are sometimes they're what the accountant set up when they registered the business, and there's no relationship to what you actually do. So I wouldn't worry too much about it if that's the category, but I would be more concerned about having the right words in your profile and the description of you and your business that make sure you get picked up in searches, because people are going to, the searches in LinkedIn are quite sophisticated. They don't just filter by industry sector. As far as I know, one of the main uses of the industry classification is with advertising, and we haven't talked about advertising, but if you are running advertising and you want to target a particular market, you can do it through that. But I don't get too hung up in it personally. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but if I haven't answered the question, please ask another question and ask for clarification. We've got a few minutes still to do that. Brilliant. Any other questions, Kirsty?
Yeah, so do you have any tips for video?
Oh yeah, lots. I've got a whole course on it. Yeah, the video, I think on LinkedIn, I think it's incredibly powerful, but I think most importantly is keep it short, because people don't have time to sit and watch a long video. So I think keep it below maximum 3 minutes, try and keep it below a minute. And if people are engaged in that, then they will want to read more. And I think get straight to the point. You don't need to start your video with an introduction. People know who you are. They've just seen your profile page. Sorry, they've just seen your comment come up. So I would say have a video. Shoot it vertical format. Let's get my phone up. you do it on the phone, shoot it that way up, not that way up. So if you're doing it that way up for social media and that way for use on the website. Talk to the camera, have an interesting background. There's a whole load of tips I can give, but I think that's kind of the main thing for LinkedIn is have an interesting message, and also introduce the message in the text above the video, and have captions as well, and edit those captions to make sure they're not misleading. So captions are important, because quite often people are looking at social media, at LinkedIn social media on their phones, and it might be in a public area. They don't want necessarily to have all the noise, but they want to be able to see what is on the video. So in a nutshell, that's a few tips for video.
Great, thank you. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Do featured posts get better viewing than normal posts or articles, and what's the real difference?
Featured posts. I think posts get more interaction than articles, but then you can promote an article with a post anyway. The promoted posts, that's advertising. So featured posts and promoted posts, those you pay for, and you pay for whatever reach that actually gets. So
cool.
That's the thing there.
What is the best way to use messaging, Neville?
Messaging. I would say the best way to use messaging in terms of generating leads.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I would start the engagement with messaging, most definitely. And one of the tips, again, with connecting is always put a message in with your connection request. Because if people just get a random connection request from somebody with no context, then they're less likely to accept it than if you start a conversation on your connection request. And then you can follow up and say, you know, great to connect, you know, blah, 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 whatever the reason is. And then with reaching out to people, then you can just treat it like a message rather than a sales pitch. If it's a genuine person-to-person message and not an email blast, then people will treat it as such. And I kind of do both things. I reach out to people individually, but if I'm trying to promote something, like getting people to come along to an event or whatever, I might cut and paste the same message to several people, but I would make it kind of personal. I'll certainly appear personal, even though I'm cutting and pasting. I'd write it in a way that appears like a personal message. And I think that's the key thing. Keep LinkedIn to be personal relationships rather than an alternative to email blasting.
Okay, brilliant. And I think that's all that we've got for questions. Thanks, Neville.
Fantastic. Well, my screen is going wobbly, so I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can go back to all of us, and I'll hand over to you to finish off.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Neville. That was really, really interesting, actually. And I hope everyone else felt that they've taken quite a lot away from this. I know that the slides and I believe this recording now is going to be made available. If you look on our YouTube channel for the Growth Hub, we'll upload it onto there. And we'll hopefully put out a little message as well, just in case there's any issues with that. But just to also let you know that we will be running our next webinar, and that is going to be on the 6th of October, and we'll have Martine Robbins from the HR department talking about how your team is the key to future business success. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that as well. But just again, like to say thank you very much to Neville, because I thought it was incredibly informative, and for all the team as well for helping to deliver this, and indeed yourselves for joining us. Like I say, I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you again very soon.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.